There's a whole generation that remembers life with rotary phones, but also witnessed the launch of the very first iPhone. And they're a group that leaves psychologists wondering exactly where to place them. If you were born between 1976 and 1985, you fall at the tail end of Gen X, but you are definitely not a millennial, no matter how hard people try to shove you into that box. You're part of what researchers started to call a Xennial back around 2014. Some sociologists have gone as far as to call this group a microgeneration because the time frame is so precise. What happened during that particular slice of history gave rise to something truly worth looking into. So today, we're going to unpack what makes them so compelling from a psychological view. For starters, you lived your childhood in a totally analog world where boredom was just a state of being and where you had to actually commit phone numbers to memory. Not to mention the sheer panic of missing your favorite TV show. It was gone for good. And yet, just as you were becoming an adult, the entire world went digital. It wasn't gradual, it was immediate. The timing of that shift produced consequences that we are still dealing with. Most generations spend their youth entirely inside one technological era or another. Xennials, however, lived through both of these transformative experiences during the very years you were still trying to figure yourself out. Your late teens were a world away from your 20s, creating a personal generation gap that most people never encounter. Think about what this meant for your daily life. Can you recall how your teenage years involved passing actual paper notes in class, or having conversations that simply vanished into thin air? Or making plans where you couldn't just text that you were running late or ask, "Where are you?" You just went to the spot and hoped that your friends would show up. That whole way of life demanded a kind of trust and commitment that seems almost alien now. But then you entered your 20s, and suddenly everyone was getting a cell phone. You made a profile on Friendster, then migrated to MySpace, and then, of course, to Facebook. Before social media took over, people had maybe 3 ways to get in touch with you: your home phone, your work phone, or just showing up at your door. Then in a flash, you're juggling 17 different messaging platforms, and you just rolled with it. During your most formative years, you had a foot in both worlds. According to studies on brain development, the prefrontal cortex, which is the part that handles our ability to adapt to new things and master complex skills, is still developing until about the age of 25. A study from Nature Neuroscience confirmed that this part of the brain is maturing well into our 20s. This all means that Xennials were still in a highly adaptable brain plasticity phase when the technological world was completely revolutionized. You were young enough that adopting new technology felt intuitive, but you were old enough to have vivid memories of what life was like just before it. Since they were adults when this tech boom happened, Gen Xers often have a bit of a skeptical attitude toward it. Millennials, on the other hand, especially the younger ones, can't really remember a time before the internet. If you're a Xennial, however, you have a solid grasp of both things, which has led to a sort of digital bilingualism that's incredibly rare. You can carry on a face-to-face conversation without glancing at your phone every 30 seconds, but you also don't break into a cold sweat when you have to learn new software. You remember the feeling of being totally unreachable for hours on end, and certainly had a sense of perspective that many younger folks just don't possess. But you're also not freaked out by new tech like some of your elders tend to be. This plays out in ways that might fly under your radar. For instance, you likely view privacy through a completely different lens than other age groups. You came of age in an era where your most cringe-worthy moments could simply fade away instead of being permanently archived online. That 7th grade disaster of a haircut, that messy breakup, that one wild party night, there's no digital trail. It only survives in the stories people tell. This forges an entirely different connection to your own history. Your memories had room to breathe, to morph into narratives, to shift over the years, which is how human memory is supposed to function. You weren't imprisoned by a digital record. Studies on our personal memories indicate that the process we use to file and retrieve our life experiences is incredibly flexible. Our minds are built to tweak our recollections, holding on to what's important and letting the minor details go. When every single thing is recorded and searchable forever, it messes with that natural system in ways we are only now beginning to grasp. Now this is where it all gets complicated. You were also hitting the workforce just as the 2008 financial crisis struck, meaning a whole lot of you faced major financial turmoil during the very years you were supposed to be getting your careers off the ground. That specific timing is more critical than most people think. Studies into the effects of economic hardship reveal that going through financial trauma at this stage of life can leave a deep psychological mark. Individuals who deal with unemployment or a shaky financial situation at that age tend to hold on to that anxiety long after their circumstances get better. It fundamentally alters how you approach money, a sense of security, and taking risks in a way that's hard to shake. So we have this entire group of people who learn to roll with massive technological shifts, but who also got financially hammered just as they were trying to find their footing. You know how to handle massive change because life forced you to, but you might also harbor this constant, quiet fear of what if everything collapses again that influences all your choices. And almost no one is discussing this unique combination of traits. The public discourse around generations loves to frame it as Gen X versus Millennials, as though everyone born after 1965 and before 2000 is cut from the same cloth. But the exact years you came into the world, particularly in times of intense transition, forge unique life paths that don't neatly align with those wide-ranging labels. Xennials live with a paradox that is, frankly, quite strange. You possess the independent streak and a healthy dose of skepticism of Gen X, since you grew up before obsessive parenting became the norm. For hours on end, your folks likely had no idea where you were, and that was totally fine. You figured out how to fix your own problems, how to keep yourself occupied, and how to manage boredom and setbacks without an adult swooping in to help. At the same time, you stepped into adulthood right when the internet was young, when technology was seen as this great unifier that would solve all our problems, before we learned that, it might actually be making a lot of things much more difficult. It's a weird place to be. Self-reliant yet collaborative, cynical yet hopeful, fluent in both digital and analog worlds. What really seems to capture the Xennial identity is the capacity to comfortably juggle these contradictions. You can recall both the world before and the world after, giving you the ability to see what's been the trade-offs, what was gained, and what we left behind. You probably don't romanticize the past the way Gen X sometimes does, because you genuinely love the technology of today. And yet, unlike younger generations, you have a clear memory of what we gave up to get it. You lost the default state of being alone with your thoughts. You lost the built-in patience that comes only from having to wait. You lost a certain depth of presence that was possible when there wasn't always another distraction waiting. In exchange, you got connection, information, and a world of opportunities your younger self would have called sci-fi. If you're a Xennial, you likely feel like you don't neatly fit into any box. You're too young for some conversations and too old for others, with a foot in two different eras. But this isn't a shortcoming. It's the central pillar of your generation's entire story, especially in a world that shifts faster than anyone can track. The fact that you've already navigated one massive world-altering transition might be one of the most powerful skills you possess. You learned how to live in a state of constant flux. You know firsthand that the world you're raised in doesn't have to be the one you inhabit forever. The Xennial story is worth understanding for that reason more than any other, not because you're special or superior, but because your life unfolded during a unique historical pivot that taught you a lesson the rest of us are still scrambling to learn: how to change with the times without losing your core identity in the process. If this hit home for you, I'd be thrilled if you subscribed, and if you want to help me continue making videos like this, you might consider becoming a channel member. Your support truly makes a huge difference. I have a few other videos lined up that I think will resonate with you. They cover different ground but share the same kind of perspective. I'll see you in the next video.